We do indeed.
Jamilo, might be the way to pronounce it, from the Netherlands. What is your opinion of Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah? In his speech today, he assured a response is coming to the murder of Saleh al-Aruri, who was a beloved friend to him. He also talked about an opportunity for Lebanon to take back what belongs to them.
Look, Hassan Nasrallah has been the leader of Hezbollah for many years now. Since this conflict, he's been somebody who has found a way to put pressure on Israel, military pressure on Israel, without having that break out into full-scale war. It takes a great deal of leadership, a great deal of, you have to be a very clever diplomat to be able to pull off what he has pulled off. But Hezbollah has red lines, and I think the assassination of this Hamas leader is one of those red lines. And Nasrallah is a man of his word. If I were the Israelis, I wouldn't be sleeping easy right now. Hezbollah, like Hamas, is a resistance organization, and when he says that Lebanon will take back what is theirs, he's talking about the Sheba farms, which Israel has occupied. That's the only thing that gives Hezbollah legitimacy, to be honest. The reason why they weren't disbanded like the other militias were, as part of the peace settlement with the Israeli withdrawal, is that Hezbollah is a resistance organization that derives its legitimacy from evicting Israel from occupied Lebanese territory. And as long as Israel occupies the Sheba farms, Hezbollah has a reason to exist. So I think what he's saying is we're going to take back the Sheba farms. And that means that they will have to strategically defeat Israel. And I think Hezbollah is positioned to do that. So we'll see. Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu right now is a leader who's in a lot of trouble. His big initiative to redo the basic laws to prevent the judiciary from prosecuting him failed. The Supreme Court has shot that down. He's a wildly unpopular leader. The war is not going well for him in Gaza, so he's looking to expand, the conflict, not just with Hezbollah, but he's hoping that this turns into a shooting war with Iran that'll compel the United States to intervene on Israel's side, and all this will be leveraged to keep him in power. Because if the war ends, if the fighting stops, the Israeli people will evict him like a bad habit.
All right, let's take another phone call. Hey there, you're on with our favorite weapons inspector live from Russia.
Yeah, hey. Hope you guys are doing well. My question is, Scott, it's pretty clear that the Russian people are in this for the long haul as far as it goes with Ukraine. I'm just wondering if, after talking with folks there, is there a shared opinion on how long they think this is going to take? And is there, kind of an opinion that folks would like this to move along and speed up? So just wondering, what folks think about that there. Thank you.
That's a good question. First of all, let's just start with some realities here. Russia is not a dictatorship, which means that there is a difference of opinion in Russia. Right now, Vladimir Putin enjoys unprecedented levels of support. Even the Russian opposition acknowledges that his support is around 76 to 80%, which is a very high level of support. But that also means that 20 to 24% of Russians don't support him, and that's not an insignificant number. And so there are Russians out there who are not satisfied with this war. They probably, there's some who, support the war but want it to go faster and feel that Putin might be putting a drag on it. There's others who just don't support Vladimir Putin at all, therefore don't support the war. But the majority of Russians are in it for the ride. What I mean by that is they're not calendar driven; they're objective driven, just like the president is. And the destruction of the Ukrainian military is That's demilitarization, and they want it destroyed. They link the Ukrainian military with Banderist ideology, with horrible acts of violence that have been perpetrated against the Russian population in Odessa and Mariupol, in the Donbass. Now with the Ukrainians attacking Belgorod, committing acts of terrorism there. They want this entity, this Banderist entity. This is the Zelensky regime destroyed, eliminated, terminated, and they're leaving it up to the Russian government to make that happen. These are people who have given up their husbands, their fathers, their brothers, their uncles to the military, and they're not sitting there saying, hey, they have to come home now. They're saying, don't come home until it's done. Get it done. Win. Don't come home with a half-baked victory. Don't come home with a half measure. Win. Man, what I can say is this. I've spoken with some very senior people who literally have their finger on the commanders of this special military operation. They pretty much share the assessment that I've been putting out there. The Russian army has achieved the strategic initiative, that the Ukrainian army is fundamentally broken. General Zaluzhny, the commander of the Ukrainian forces, came out today and said, we don't have any men left. Well, that's what I've been saying all along. When you lose more men, when you lose men at a rate that's far greater than that which you can replace, you start running a deficit on the front. And that's what's happening right now. There are giant holes appearing, and the Russians are exploiting these. The Russian forces are going over on the offensive, and there's a feeling that this whole thing will be done by September, and that when it's done, the map of Ukraine will not look like it looks like right now. That Odessa, Mykolaiv, Dnipropetrovsk, and Kharkov will also be Russian territories. That's a very optimistic outlook, but again, when you're looking, the feeling is that there's a total collapse taking place on the Ukrainian front, and eventually the cohesion will deteriorate to the point where there'll be nothing that can stop the Russian advance, and we're at that point.
All right, let's take another call. Hi there, you're on with our favorite weapons inspector. What is your very concise question?
Hi, I have two short questions. A few months ago, I tried buying a signed copy of your disarmament book, Scott, and there was no shipping to Canada available. Could that be fixed in the future?
It's already fixed. You can now order it.
Oh, cool. Okay. Another one is, did you bring enough coins this time? I know last time you were having some trouble.
I mean, I'm only about a third of the way through my trip, and the places where I think the coins will be not in greater demand, but they're where they were designed to be given, I have yet to go to. I hope I have brought enough coins. So far, there's been more than enough to go around. But I did my math this time, and I let's just say that I more than doubled the order that I bought for this trip.
All right, thanks for the call.
Awesome. Enjoy the trip.
So if you want, he was asking about the book. If you're interested in the book or any of our merchandise, you can go to scottrittermerch.com, scottrittermerch.com. Next question is from Torstein in Norway. What requirements does Russia have to start with a possible ceasefire if negotiations with Ukraine are initiated?
I mean, that's an issue for the Russian leadership and the Russian military. But so far, the takeaway I have in talking to people is what negotiations? There won't be a negotiation. There's unconditional terms of surrender. The Russians aren't playing games here. This isn't something where they had their negotiation. Ukraine had the chance to finish this war back in March and April of 2022. They threw that chance away. I believe that there's people saying that as recently as the fall of 2023, Russia was saying we're willing to do it. And now Russia's won. They literally have won the game. They've turned the corner. They sacrificed so much to get to where they're at. And what, they're going to throw it away by giving Ukraine a negotiated end? No, They are beating the Ukrainian army to destroy the Ukrainian army, and to destroying the Ukrainian army to bring about the collapse of the Zelensky regime. Why would you negotiate with the regime you're seeking to terminate, and you're succeeding in terminating? So no, there will be, from my perspective, there will be no negotiated conclusion. This war ends when Russia defeats the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians say, we surrender, and the Russians hand them unconditional terms of surrender. And that's that. I just don't believe there will be a negotiation. That's a Western fantasy.
Scott Ritter.
Hi there. Lower your computer quickly. What's your question for Scott?
Yes, sir, Scott. Hey, I'm making a delivery to Yankee Candle in Massachusetts tomorrow. I'm a track trailer driver. I want to know what your favorite scent is, and if the Russians have an equivalent, and if you get to visit their production facility.
All right. What is your favorite scent, Scott? I've been wondering that for years. I'm glad he asked.
Well, there you go. Now, well, I mean, I have balsam and cedar is everybody's favorite. It's one of mine, and spiced pumpkin is another one that that I like a lot. But you know, if you're a Yankee Candle delivery guy, maybe you know that about a decade ago, Yankee Candle used to make these ceramic votive holders where you could put 3 votives in there. That votive is a small candle, but the idea was that you put 3 different scents, and then you light all 3, and they blend together to make a unique scent. And so I'm somebody that's been mixing and matching votives for a long time now to create, a scent that matches the season. I'm giving away the sensitive side of me.
Oh, that's how I feel about a nice red wine blend of like 3 different types of wine.
Yeah, but I think it would be wonderful if Yankee Candle could get into the Russian market, but we need sanctions to be lifted before that could happen. But I don't, to be honest, I haven't done enough shopping around. Maybe there's people in the Russian audience that will say whether or not scented candles is something that's big in Russia. But I would imagine the Russians, because of the winters, would lean towards a lot of the fall and winter scents that Yankee Candle puts out there, especially the Christmas scents that smell like the balsam cedar scents, the Christmas tree scents, things of that nature.
We have a voicemail message from a gentleman named Harry Pappas.
And protecting the Palestinians from Israeli.
Let me see. I don't think that was rewound. Let me try to get that again. Sorry about that.
How powerful is Jordan's military, and why are they not getting involved in protecting the Palestinians from Israeli aggression, particularly in the West Bank?
The Jordanian military is very small. They have professional officers, and they have some units that have tactical competency. But I don't think the Jordanian military is of the size and has the sustainability to fight a major war. On the ground, the Israeli Defense Force has shown itself to be fairly inept in Gaza, but they do have a very strong Air Force, and that Air Force would punish the Jordanians tremendously. And I think that the Jordanian king has to be careful too, because a military defeat could lead to an uprising within Jordan from the Palestinian population or pro-Palestinians. So the last thing the Jordanian government wants is a conflict with a nation that can readily defeat their army. But it's a weak army. It's not a very strong army at all.
Don in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. Why does the commentariat, including the best, meaning you, our favorite weapons inspector, not opine on whether the October 7th Hamas raid was allowed to happen or even was instigated by Israeli agent provocateurs? Reportedly, on October 7th, the gates where Hamas entered Israel were mostly unguarded and the security cameras were turned off, much like Epstein's jail cell.
I have opined on it. I mean, I've actually talked about this in depth. I think that the Israeli intelligence forces were asleep at the wheel. I think that the Israeli government had convinced itself that Hamas would never attack of that nature. I think a lot of Israeli forces that were in the Gaza region were withdrawn to the West Bank, where there was anticipation of more violence because of increased settlement activity. And I think we just had a perfect storm of incompetence. Hamas has been planning this operation for a year. One of the reasons why I'm not a fan of the inside job thing is that it diminishes what Hamas has accomplished. Hamas kicked the ass of the Israelis. It was just a straight up ass kick. And I'm not going to take away from that by saying they couldn't have done it unless the Israelis wanted it to be done or this had to be done. No, there's no evidence of that. When you say security cameras were turned off, where? Which cameras were turned off? We know that the operators were there. We know that the operators saw Hamas do it. We know the operators were reporting it. The system worked in terms of intelligence collection. And even in the analytical aspect of it, they were sending reports up the chain saying, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. This is an imagination failure. This is a leadership failure on the part of the Israelis. The government of Benjamin Netanyahu, the Minister of Defense, the Chief of Staff, all of whom were briefed on this on October 6th and said, rather than calling the alert, said, we're just going to go to bed and sleep on it. We'll meet again in the morning. But by the time they met in the morning, it was too late. The dam had broke. The Al-Aqsa flood had gone in. I'm not a believer in conspiracy theories. I think Hamas kicked the living hell out of the Israelis. I think it was a well-planned operation. And I think the Israelis were extraordinarily incompetent. I'm a big fan of incompetence. The problem with conspiracy theories is it requires a lot of competence to pull it off. And no, I don't see that level of competence.
What about the death of Jeffrey Epstein? Suicide or murder?
I think murder. Straight up.
So there was a competent conspiracy. Now, this was the question that we started to ask when we lost the internet connection the other day. It's a lot better today, so hopefully we won't lose it now. I don't know if that's pronounced Kal or Cal or Kali in Denmark. Since 2014, civilian areas in the Donbass have been shelled from the Ukrainian side of the front, but even 2 years into the war, it continues. Why has it been so difficult for the Russian troops to stop it? Because they know exactly from where the shots are being fired again and again, don't they?
There's we did an interview of a Russian journalist, Marat Karela, I believe his last name is. Do you remember that interview, Jeff?
Oh, absolutely. Not too long ago. And by the way, Yelena was there to help us with that. And she's also helping us today a little bit earlier than usual and couldn't make it. So thanks to Yelena. So what were you going to say about Marat?
I've encouraged people to read his Substack article, and he just wrote a fantastic piece about the fighting in the Advika area and how difficult this fighting is. The fact that the Ukrainians had buried themselves in the ground, underground fortresses, concrete topped. I mean, these are extraordinary, difficult, the most highly, dug in, fortified position imaginable. And it's just a horrific problem to crack that nut. Russia has been trying, and they're succeeding now. Advika is getting ready to fall, but it's only happening because of the extraordinary heroism and tenacity of the Russian attacker, who is taking these bunkers one at a time at a very serious cost. So it's not like the Russians have been doing nothing. It's positional warfare along the Donbass front because the Ukrainians have turned it into it's a huge fortress, and the Russians are they're cracking that nut. They're advancing. They're going to recapture this territory or capture this territory, and they're going to push the Ukrainians outside of artillery range. But it hasn't been for a lack of trying for this. Remember, the Russians. They had to dig in after the disaster of the fall of 2002. They had mobilize 300,000 troops. They had to destroy Ukrainian counteroffensive. There's been a lot of things happening that Russia's been doing, developing new weapon systems, new ways of fighting. They've been destroying Ukrainian air defense systems, destroying Ukrainian energy infrastructure. This is a broad spectrum campaign that's taking place. And while the shelling of the Donbass is horrific from a humanity standpoint, from a strategic standpoint, it's not the number one priority. But now Russia has the forces available to allocate them to removing this threat as part of their general process of pushing the Ukrainians back. And so they're going to do it, and they are doing it. But war is hell. I mean, it's not as though the Russians don't want the shelling to end. Of course they want it to end. It's just that if you poured all the resources that would be necessary to rapidly bring this fight to an end, you'd be the one throwing away your soldiers in meat grinder attacks. The Ukrainians would be the ones benefiting from suicidal Russian attacks. Instead, the Russians went over on the defensive and chewed up the Ukrainians, and in doing so, they've created a manpower shortage for the Ukrainians, so that now, as they put pressure on Avdiivka, the Ukrainians don't have reserves that can come in and replace those troops that are being lost. And so the Russians get into a mini meat grinder operation in Avdiivka, but the Ukrainians can't replace those troops. The Russians can replace their troops. The advantage accrues, and they're able to push them out. But they can do it now because they have won victories elsewhere, because they chewed up a Ukrainian counteroffensive where the Ukrainians lost 90,000 guys. So, it's just part of the larger strategy of, the destruction of the Ukrainian army that's taking place.
Mohammed El Ghazar is watching us live on X. I would like to ask something that pertains to Egypt and Egyptian military equipment that is acquired from the USA. Does the Egyptian military have full control of said armament, or do they need a sort of key or code from the U.S. to work?
My understanding is that the Egyptians have full control with it. Many of the Egyptian weapons are built in Egypt using on contract. They have factories that have a license to produce, for instance, M1 tanks. I believe they produce those. The aircraft belong to the Egyptian Air Force. They're flown by the Egyptian Air Force. There is no American person there who has to key in a code or anything like that. So no, I think Egypt has full sovereignty. Now, there are legal restrictions to what Egypt can do with these equipment. For instance, if Egypt were to go out and bomb the GERD dam in Ethiopia, I think the United States would say that Egypt has opened the door for sanctions because they've used the weapons in violation of international law to carry out a war of aggression or something like that. But until Egypt does something with the weapons that violates international law or violates an understanding with the United States, they're Egypt's weapons to use any way they want to.
All right, it's time to give away the coin. This is the special New Year's coin that Scott is giving away to those he's meeting in Russia. We have what looks like 424 people who have entered, and let's do the drawing right now and see who will win a free coin. All right, and the winner is ITSD Data Recovery. What a cuddly name. So get a hold of us by email. You can send an email to info@ustourofduty.org, and we will be glad to get your address and send that out to you. So you said we should do it for an hour. It's an hour now, Scott. You want to wrap it up?
Yeah, because it's getting on to 1 o'clock in the morning, and I have another exciting day to go in Chechnya before I return to Moscow. So I'd like to stay on for an additional hour, but I do need my beauty rest. And if anybody sees my face, you'll understand it's a true statement.
All right. We understand, and we really appreciate you making time for us. That'll do it for this episode of Ask the Inspector on January 5th, 2024. It's episode 126. Thanks for joining us, and thanks to Yelena for her great work backstage. Much appreciated. And we don't know when the next episode will be, but we will do our best to come back to you with another episode.
Hàng tiếp theo chúng ta móc 18 mũi đơn. Nhồi bông. Tiếp theo, hàng 13 móc một đơn một giảm 6 lần. Hàng thứ 14 móc 12 mũi đơn. Hàng thứ 15 móc 6 mũi giảm.